All right, as I have been doing for most of the semester, there is a folder out there under the P drive for the class with today's date on it if you want to copy it over. If you don't, that's your call. But just to very quickly go over with you what's in there, there are some PDFs that I put in there, and I'm not going to go through any of these, but there's some PDFs, some articles. This is pretty well done. It's like 59 pages long. It's called singlepageappbook.com introduction. Again, you can look at that if you have an interest. There's 5 different articles in here, and what I'm going to do is go over a couple of them, all right, right now. And you don't have to worry about following along or anything. I've already built the 2 apps in there. They both work. So I'm going to show those to you in just a second. All right. Now, I realize not everyone in here had me for the 152-119 class, the learning to program using JavaScript class. And I don't know who you had, but I know Roger was in my class, but I don't know if I had any of the rest of you or not. All right, if I did, sorry if I've forgotten or whatever. But I had a question, I guess, is have you ever heard of any of these packages right here? Probably at a minimum, you should have heard of like jsfiddle.net, all right, codepen.io, jsbin.com, and the one I'm going to go over today, which is plunker.co. All right, and the reason I'm asking you that is if we look over here, let's see, here's CodePen, and what you can do literally is it says it's a playground for the front end web. So in other words, what you can do is you can put in there your HTML, your CSS, your JavaScript, etc., and run it and see what it looks like. All right, in its own little playground, so to speak. The one that I used a lot when I taught the 119 class was JSBin. So when you look in here, for instance, I can grab any of these things that are in here, and if I want to, I can either remove them or I can add them, etc. So notice there's the CSS, but if I don't want CSS, if I don't want JavaScript, etc. And I can come in here and just put in a p tag. And you notice how it comes up there real quick. All right. Now, you may have gone through this already, but I just wanted to make sure you've seen that. JSFiddle works much the same way. And actually, so does Plunker. But Plunker is the one that's actually recommended that you use with Angular. All right. And I've actually even read a couple articles on it. I'm not sure exactly why they recommend that, but they just say that it works the best with Angular. All right. So if I go out here and I launch the editor, what you see, what you get by default, and this is a little weird, hopefully what I'm about to say to you is going to make sense. This is a software package that was actually written by a non-IT guy. All right, plunker.io. It was actually written by an investment banker in his free time because he wanted to learn programming. Okay? And what you see in here, there's an index.html, there's a script.js with really nothing in it, a style.css with really nothing in it, and you'll notice I can come in here if I want to, and I can create new files, which is all fine and dandy. But everything has got to be under here. In other words, I can't create folder structures in here. You understand what I'm saying? So everything literally exists underneath there. Well, that's kind of hard because in the first example that we're going to go over in just a minute, they expect that you have a folder, and that folder is called, I think it's Pages. So you can simulate a folder in here. So in other words, I can click New File, and I can give it a name that says pages/home.html. And you'll notice it's got pages/. But I just want you to realize that it really isn't under a folder called Pages. It's just really right there. All right, so I'm going to go over this in just a couple minutes. You'll notice that if I come back to index and I decide, oh, well, there's Bootstrap, I'd like to add that. You may or may not be able to tell this, but if I click, basically what it's going to do is someplace in here, it's literally going to add it for me. All right. And there's a few things that are over here. You'll notice there's a preview window. There's nothing in there right now other than Hello Plunker. But again, what you see is the same kind of thing. All right. And you can see how you can sit there and add stuff fairly quickly. But again, it works pretty much the same way as JS Bin or JS Fiddle or CodePen. All right. But I just wanted you to see that. And what I've done in here, if you have an interest, again, if you don't, forget about this one right here. But there's a thing here that says Plunker URLs. And this is the home page. This is a tutorial. One of these tutorials is from someone who's from another country. He's very hard to understand, and it really isn't much in it. All right. This one right here is almost 50 minutes long. And what it is there's a guy who introduces it, and then it's the guy who created Plunker. And I started watching it, and I watched about the first 15 minutes. But all it is, that as far as what I watched, was 15 minutes worth of the guy who wrote the package saying, I'm not an IT guy, and this is what the package is supposed to. It was a PowerPoint presentation. So it might be a lot better than that. Maybe when you go through it a little more, it's better. But I didn't watch it any more than that. The point is, I just wanted to throw some stuff out there. So if you've got an interest. All right. So there's 2 demos that are in here. And again, I just want to quickly show you what's going on in here. And then I'm going to actually, oops, not like that. I'm not going to. That's what happens when you open up .docx files and you open them up in Notepad. All right. So it's pretty much the same application. Notice single page app with AngularJS routing and templating. Well, what does that mean? Well, if I come up here and I open this up, okay, you'll notice if I take a look in here and I run this, there's my home page, okay? And if I click about, come on, I know you've been off for a while, but well, I shouldn't have done that because I just removed what I had on there. So, well, I'll tell you what. Why don't we do this? Now I closed them both. Alrighty. This is that other thing that I started to show you. This guy does an introduction, but like I said, then when you start going through here, if you notice what I'm saying, that's the guy, and he just, I went through about the first 15 minutes, and it was just all PowerPoint after PowerPoint after PowerPoint. And he did some explanatory text, but it wasn't real much. Okay? All right. Now, why he called it this, I don't know, but if you notice, there are no vowels in here. So this is Plunker. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put the stuff back in there to show it to you. But what I want you to understand is this. When you launch the editor, you can build whatever you want to build in here. If you decide you want to save what you're building, you can. All right? So if I wanted to save this right now, okay, I could save it. Boom. And it says Plunk created. But if you want to save this, you literally have to have an account with github.com. So if you go into github.com and it's free, if you create an account, then you can come into Plunker, do this stuff, and save what you're working on. All right? I don't know if that all made sense or not, but let me just show you the files. All right? And again, you'll notice in here, I made a folder, but there really isn't a folder out on Plunker, but let's just take a look at these files right here. All right? Hopefully you remember a little bit of this stuff from the last class period, such as ng-app. All right? That's the Angular app directive that says what we're going to call this is Scotch app. Now, why is it Scotch app? because this is taken from scotch.io. It's a website. All right, that's why I think they called it that. All right, they've added a few things in here. They've added the Bootstrap CSS file, and they've added Font Awesome. All right, just so you can have a few little things with fonts and some CSS. Okay, then they've come in here, and if you notice, there is where they're adding the Angular stuff, right there. Okay, get out of there. Okay, then you come into here, and we have yet another one, another Angular directive, ng controller. So it says this is going to be called main controller. All right, what the heck does that mean? Well, if we go into the JavaScript file, here is our main controller. All right, and what this is going to do, and I'll add this stuff back in just a second, is if we're on the home page, it's going to say BTC Uber homepage. If we're on the About page, it's going to say BTC Uber About page. And if we're on the Contact page, it'll say BTC Uber Contact page. You may remember this from the last time because we went through it, but kind of quickly. This is where all the magic takes place because that's where all the routing is taking place. All right? So this says basically when you're at the root, we want to load in pages home.html. If we're at the About, we want to load in pages About. If we're at Contact, we want to load in pages Contact. Now, it's a very simple example. And why am I saying that? Because notice it's using very, very, very simple controllers. What do I mean? There they are. There's just a line of code in each one that basically says what page it's on. That's literally all it does. All right? And the other stuff that's in here, because I went over it kind of fast, this stuff that's in here, this fa home, this fa shield, and this fa comment that's in here, that's the stuff from FA is Font Awesome. And that's just so that on your page, you've got a nice little thing that's in there that looks like a home. The comment looks like a call-out type of box, etc. On Wednesday, I'm going to show you, because I went back and I rewrote the BTC Uber app over the weekend, and I've just finished the home page right now. And I use these. We're Font Awesome. All right, just to show you. And I've got one that's automotive that brings up a little picture of a car, another one that says road, and it brings up a picture of a road, as you'd guess, and another one that's called university that brings up, it's supposed to be like the picture of a school. So I use those in there. All right, let me copy these in just so you can see exactly what's happening here, okay? All right, so this index, I should have just left it open. So that's just literally now everything is in here in the index.html file. It's looking black right now, which I don't like, but I don't think I did anything wrong, but we're going to find out anyway. All right. And then I'm going to come in here to script, which, as you can see, again, there's nothing in there. So I'm going to come into my script file. Oh, that might be what I just put in there. Okie dokie. All righty. So there's my script stuff. Okay, let me get back into here because that's the wrong file. All right. Then I'm going to come back in here and grab the index stuff here and copy that in. All right, so right now I've got two files in here. I've got my index.html file, and you can see these are the favicons. Home looks like a little house. Not favicons, but the Font Awesome icons. The About, which they use the shield, and the Contact, which is supposed to be a call-out type of thing. All right. Now, I've got to create 3 more pages here, so I click New File, and I put pages/about.html. All right, there it is. Then I've got to come back into here and grab that About. You should remember this from last time, because what this is going to do is it's going to give me an H1 tag that says About Page. And then underneath that, in a paragraph tag, it's going to basically echo out that message. That message is what we just set up in the controller that we looked at earlier. So if I grab this, right? There's the about. And if I come back in here now, do a new file, and I'm going to say pages/contact.html, they're pretty much the same file. So in here, I just change it from home page to contact page. All right. And then I've got one more here that I've got to create, another new file, and that's going to be called, what do we got? We got about, contact, and this one was called pages home.html. All right, we come back in here again, and we type in homepage. Okay? Now, hopefully you can already see this over here as far as what's happening, because I'm at the home page. Notice when I go to the about page, it changes to the about page. And when I go to the contact page, it changes to the contact page. And what we're basically doing is we're creating a very, very simple single page app. All right? There's just different views that we're loading into the same area to put our stuff in. Now, I noticed when I worked with this, okay, if I could keep going back and forth, as you'd guess, and everything worked fine, except for some reason the home page. If I tried to switch back and forth and switch real fast, I could lose that home page. And when that happened, all I had to do was reload it, and then it came back in again. All right? But again, I know I went through that very quickly, but if we look right here, they explain what's going on in here. All right, we're going to make a simple site with a home page, an about page, and a contact page. Angular is built for more advanced apps than this. All right, but as it says, the tutorial will show you many of the concepts you need for larger projects. In other words, it's done very simplistically on purpose. All right, and they do mention we want an SPA, a single page application, no page refresh, and hopefully you notice that. Different data on each page, you notice that. All right, so this is the file structure. And the author mentions right above that, this could have been done with JavaScript and Ajax. Part of the problem when you keep coming up with new libraries and new frameworks, etc., is there are a certain number of people who say, that's fine, but I could already do this in a package that I used to use. Why should I use this? All right. The idea behind Angular, why Angular, is that you're writing less and less code, and more of the code is being generated for you automatically. All right. And that's a reason that some people like it, and it's also a reason that some people don't like it. All right. Languages, by and large, and I'm going to make a very general statement here. If you've never heard me use these words before, many languages, especially web languages, are getting to be more implicit in nature. All right? Whereas in the past, virtually every language was explicit in nature. What's the difference? When it's implicit in nature, you're giving more and more power to the software and less power to the person using it. When it's explicit, all right, you have more power. And back in the day, there really weren't frameworks. There were libraries where people went and they wrote a bunch of different functions that you could use. And you had to call those functions to make, whatever you wanted to have happen. Well, you call those explicitly. So basically, when you use libraries in conjunction with a programming language, it was done in an explicit way. But today, frameworks are hotter, so to speak, than libraries. And with frameworks, many more things are done implicitly. So they're done behind the scenes. Some people like that. Some people don't like that. Part of the problem is there's just so darn much to learn. There's no one that I know that knows everything. All right, and I was going to start with this. I don't know why I didn't, but I didn't. I got sent this the other day. 21 hot programming trends and 21 going cold. And you'll notice as you start looking through here, I'm just going to hit a couple of the high points. Hot, JavaScript frameworks. MV, model view. All right, and Angular is a model view framework. Technically, it's not even a model view controller. All right. Rather, it's what's called an MVVM. It's a model view model. I don't even want to get into it with you right now. All right. But what they're talking about is it says, long ago, people learned how to write JavaScript to create a pop-up box, etc. Now, there's dozens of frameworks. And if you notice that one of the ones that's in there is Angular. All right. Again, notice what's hot. Not only are there frameworks for your JavaScript, there's frameworks for CSS. You might have heard of things like Sass and Less. And one of the things that those particular things do is they act, for lack of better words, like preprocessors. And what you can do with Less and what you can do with Sass is you can create your own variables inside of CSS and use those page-wide. All right. And programmers like that. I don't know if designers like that as much because it starts to get them into the programming realm. All right.
No, you can also do loops if statements.
Oh yeah, you can do you can do programming in it. That's basically what you're doing.
And there's also J for HTML too.
All right. And it says hot SVG and JavaScript on Canvas. All right. There's even a new jQuery it's like JCanvas, I think it's called, that's meant to work with this. All right. Notice what's not hot. All right. And again, just a couple more things that are in here. What's hot? Single page apps. That's one of the reasons I wanted to show it to you. All right. It says, now apps are front end to large databases filled with content. When the web app wants information, it pulls it from the database and pours it into the local mode. That stuff is fine, but it's not even that important. It all goes back to what we talked about last week, and that is the fact that mobile apps are taking over. And people don't have time. It's not even a Flickr thing. They don't want to take the time to have stuff constantly be loading and reloading, etc. And they might be working on a website while they're playing a game and doing other things. All right. Hot. Mobile web apps, not native web apps. I don't agree with this one. All right. Really, true mobile web apps are things that you can build in packages like Cordova, where you can use them on any platform. So you can run them on an Android machine, you can run them on an iOS machine, etc. Whereas a native mobile app, a native iOS app is going to be written in Swift. A native Android app is going to be written, at least for now, in Java. All right. And again, I don't necessarily agree with this. Hot, Android, not iOS. Android is hot. They've got a bigger share of the market. All right. But one thing about anyone who has any kind of Apple product, by and large, they're loyal. All right. My kids back since, I don't know what it was, iPhone 4, I think it was. You know, that's all they've ever wanted. I had an iPhone 4, and I didn't particularly like it. So when the 5s came out, I went to an Android. And I've got an Android right now. I like them better. All right. But I don't think either one of them is going away. Do you ever hear of this stuff, AAS? Anything with AAS? All right, that means as a service. And by and large, what a lot of that stuff means is that rather, companies are having a hard time doing things like hiring really good security people. So they might get IaaS, which is information as a service, where they contract someone out or they're able to buy a piece of software to put onto their own software to add to their security. All right. And the PaaS is platform as a service. All right. Hot, web interfaces, not IDEs. Right. Like, well, geez, you're teaching us all these friggin' IDEs. They're not going away anytime soon. All right. And even with Angular, you may or may not know this, but with Angular, there's already Angular 2 is coming out. And there was Angular 1, then 1.2, then 1.3, and then a bunch of other 1.3 point something. And there's articles that you can go and look up online that say, should you even learn Angular 1? And the answer is yes, because there's stuff out there that works in Angular 1 that will probably won't even have to be touched when you go to Angular 2, or be touched a very little bit. All right. This is a big one. All right. It wasn't that many years ago. I'm PHP 5.3 certified. All right. And what happened was, this must be a good 5 years ago, if not more than that, when Blackhawk actually used to let us do stuff. I don't know how, but I had money in my budget for that year. We don't have budgets anymore, but I did, and I was able to go to San Diego for a conference. And I went and sat in for the certification test and passed. All right. But the point is, while we were there, this, like I said, was 5 or 6, something like that, 4 to 6 years ago. I don't remember exactly how many. But the guy said, okay, we're coming. PHP 6 is on the way, and it's going to rock. It's going to be so cool. It's going to be this. I listened to an hour-long presentation. Guess what? It never even was published. It never even came out. They went right from about PHP 5.6. I think that's the newest. They're going right into PHP 7. They're just totally skipping 6. All right. Just like when you went from Windows 8 to Windows 10. All right. Same kind of an idea. And I know pretty well. I know PHP 5.x. I'm not sure how much it's going to change in 7, but when we go in and start working on it in fall, ideally we're going to have 7 available to us. All right. Hot, just-in-time education. All right. Not 4 years up front. And it's interesting. I just want to show you this. I've taken classes with this guy before. His name is Mark Price, and he runs a place called DevSlopes. And what he's actually offering now, I watched one of his webinars over the weekend, and these guys want to teach you whatever you want to learn. Android, eventually Angular, iOS, etc. But it's more like a Udemy type of class where they'll have stuff online, but they want it better than that. All right. What do I mean? Well, you can either come by them for a week, $1,500, and they'll take you from knowing nothing to basically being an expert. All right. Or they'll come by you, or you can come by them. And the guy was even mentioning on there what he wants to do is he literally would love to buy a boat and sail up and down California and hit all the major cities and offer classes in there. And before you say one way or the other, who cares, big deal, one way or the other, they put this thing out, and I pledged $25. All right. And they put this out, and they were hoping, I think they were hoping for, it was like $25,000. Within 2 days, they had 40 grand. Now they're hoping they're going to have 300,000, where they were hoping, it's basically 10 times what they were hoping. And one of the things that he professes in here is, he says he thinks degrees are going to be kind of passé after a while, and that more and more people are going to be doing this. Just another reason I'm glad I'll be retiring soon. So, all right. So I showed you the first one, and this is what I was going to show you before, but we've gone through part 1 of the book. We went through part 2 of the book, part 3 of the book, part 4 of the book, and really the stuff that's in part 5 of this book, our book, it's pretty damn heavy if you've looked at it at all. But the first chapter in here, chapter 20, actually is pretty good. Okay? I'm not going to go over it right now, but they talk about what Angular is. They talk about the Angular life cycle. They talk about many of the things that we looked at when we watched that video last week. And Roger, I don't think you were here for the video. It's called AngularJS in 60-ish minutes. Yes. And we managed to watch most of it, probably the first 50 minutes or so of it. All right. And it's, you can just go out to YouTube and just type that in. AngularJS in 60-ish minutes. But he does a good job in here of trying to explain better than I just did why you might want to use Angular. I don't want to read to you, but I'll just tell you right now, this is such a big one right there. By and large, there's very few people that I know, even web developers that I know, that I would say to you, oh, that person's really good at manipulating the DOM. By and large, people who are full-time developers hate doing that. It's a pain in the butt. So one of the reasons that a thing like Angular is popular is that there's very little DOM manipulation that you have to do. It's still done, but it's done behind the scenes. All right? But you can read through this, okay? And they talk about it. Again, one of the clear things is with this model view controller type of architecture, there is a clear separation. The model is your data. The view is how that data is presented. And the controller is basically the glue that allows the model and the view to be able to talk to one another. You saw a little bit of this last week when we went over that thing in 60-ish minutes. All right? And he talked about $scope and how that was the glue. All right? And that's pretty much what they're talking about in here. But again, he talks about MVC, the model being the source, the data being, the view being the rendered web page, and the controller handling the interaction between the two. All right? And then he comes in and he talks about the whole concept of modules. And what is a module? Remember that thing at the top of our program where it said ng app? That's a module. All right? And if you remember what the guy even said on there, on that tape was, yeah, they could have probably called it ng module. And he said, but I like ng. Oh, who cares what you like? That's just the name somebody came up with, and that's the one they're going to use. All right? If you want more on templates and more on directives, again, what this guy, that in the thing we watched last week, if you remember, he mentioned that you use directives, for lack of better words, to kind of supercharge HTML, to allow HTML to do things it couldn't naturally on its own do. And if you think about that, you think, well, wow, that kind of sounds a lot like jQuery. It is. jQuery is another framework that you can use. All right? We talked a little bit about expressions. You just saw expressions. That's those things that are inside of the double curly braces. All right? That's an expression. You can actually do math in there. The only thing you can't do, to go back, Corey, to what you mentioned before, you can't actually do programming in an expression. You can't loop. You can't do anything conditionally. But you can do any kind of arithmetic manipulation or any kind of a string manipulation you want to or have to do. All right. As it says, it uses controllers to augment the scope. What does augment mean? It means to basically add to. All right? It sets up the initial state or values in the scope, and it adds behaviors. That's the logic. Right? That's exactly what he's talking about in there. All right? The data binding, that's by using those curly braces, all right, those double curly braces, and syncing up inside of your JS file your controller with the directives that are in your .html file. You're able to not only print out things, but print out things on the fly. If you remember that first example that we looked at last week, all right, we just had a text box. And as soon as I started typing stuff into the text box, immediately down below it, you saw that stuff updated, okay, in an H1 tag. That's what people want. If there's one thing that's happening more and more today, all right, and it's funny because now I'm sounding like my dad, which scares the hell out of me, all right? But I remember my dad saying, yeah, you and kids, and you're this, and your kids, and you're that, and it's true. But now, when I look at millennials compared to Generation X's, which I guess is what I am, I thought we were an impatient group. My God, it's the most impatient people I've ever seen in my life. And you laugh, but wait till your kids become you guys, because they're going to be less patient than you are. And I'm much less patient than my parents were. I've no doubt about that. All right. You can have things that are called services. For lack of better words, services are like libraries. Because what it is if you've got code that you're going to be using again and again and again, you can put it in what's called a service, or another word for that is a factory. You can put it in there to be able to use it. All right. They talk about injection. That's the whole idea of this. Is what you end up doing is you inject your HTML with the Angular code to make it do things it couldn't do otherwise. And more than anything else, make it do things in real time. The idea is the difference between, for example, close a bunch of these here, minimize them, that if I do something like this, so if I come up and do that, okay, what is that? Well, I just open up a document in Word, right? Okay, and that's a desktop application. What people want today is they want their web applications to look just like a desktop application. They want it to react the same way. They don't even want the idea that they're on the web. And that's one of the things that Angular helps you to do. All right. The second example that was in here, and I'll put this up here just so you see it. All right. What it is it brought in a bunch of animation. So I can show you that. Let's see. Oh, I do have that one up. Good. All right. So there's the animation. Doesn't look like much. Notice if I'm on the home page. So there's different colors and there's different kinds of animation that are taking place. All right. And that particular one is the second article here. Again, you may or you may not remember this from the video we watched last week, but we talked a little bit about NG View. And we mentioned with a single page application that it was the view that was changing, because you've got an area that is holding a web page and you're swapping different views in and out of that area. That's what this is all about. But again, ideally, you notice that when we just did that, there's no flicker like you see typically in other applications. Okay? Next semester we'll talk about PHP and we'll talk about ASP.NET. There is a flicker in both of those. All right. In fact, what I'm going to do on Thursday, as I mentioned, I decided to do this because we got 4 Thursdays left, so I thought it would work out well. I said that the last week in the advanced Java class, we're going to build in there a very simple calculator. All right, we'll build it first non-GUI, then we'll build it GUI. And if there's time, there should be, we'll even put a little bit of error handling in it so you'll see how error handling is done. All right, but what I'm going to do on Thursdays for the rest of the semester, because there are 4 of them, this Thursday, I'm going to go over my first page of the BTC Uber app and show you what I did. All right. And then after that, I'm going to go over a very simple example. I don't know which one we'll choose first, but think about it. There's 4 more classes. So we've already got the advanced Java covered. So there's PHP, there's ASP.NET, there's C, and there's Bootstrap. All right. So I'm going to show you a very simple little project with each one of those for the next 4 Thursdays after we go over a little bit of the BTC Uber thing. Just so you know, I like to have people know what they're getting themselves into, for lack of better words. All right, does that make sense? So again, I would say if, like I mentioned to you, Roger, you might want to do this. So again, if I just go into YouTube here and I type in AngularJS there it is, in 60 minutes, it's really 60-ish. but there it is. Dan
Really
Wallin
nice
is the
feature
guy.
to have available.
He's the guy
So
who
that's an
who does it, and
example
it's about an hour and 10 minutes long, something like that. But I would say if you get some time, take a look at that. I went back and reread chapters 20 through 29 in the book, and I think you're going to get nothing but confused if you look at those. But now you should be able to look at these two articles that I put in there. This is the second one, and of course there's the first one. This single page apps with AngularJS, and they're both about 7 pages long. And half of that stuff that's in there is code. All right? So we went through that one, and the other one I showed you more than I went over, but when you look at it as far as what's different in there, well, all of the animation is being done using CSS. All right, so virtually everything that was done in there could have been done without using Angular. All right, but again, you would have had a little bit more flicker. This time, instead of calling it page slash, he calls it page dash. Okay, why? I don't have any idea. But he runs through there, and the files that change, he doesn't use the regular JS file that comes with it. He creates a new one called app.js. You didn't have to do that. And he puts the actual index file itself is really small. How small? That's it. That's it. All right. So when you come in there, the routing doesn't look much different than the other one, except previously we'd said in there page slash, and now it's page dash. Other than that, there's not a lot of change in there. The main controller, now he's using an actual page class. That's been identified in the CSS, and that's what gives it its color, and that's what gives it its animation effect. You might have noticed one of them twirled, one of them kind of dropped off, etc. And all of that stuff is done inside of the CSS. All right? And no, that's not all of it. That's just the beginning of it. There's a lot of CSS that he put in here. All right? All of that is CSS. All right? So the idea was just to introduce you to this stuff. There's no way. We could easily have a class in this. All right? Before I'd have a class in this, I would want to take a class in it myself. All right? And there are a lot of them out there. I mentioned this to you before. This is the last thing I'll say to you, that I take a lot of classes on Udemy.com. It's a really good site. Unfortunately, the majority of classes that are in there, you have to pay for. But if I type in here, for example, here, AngularJS free, there are 6 free classes. Now, how are they? I don't know. All right, but these 6 that are in here are free. And you can usually, 1,125 reviews. All right, 4 stars. I don't think that guy had the wherewithal to go out there 1,125 times and give himself good reviews. Okay? A lot of times what you get when you go out here and the things are free like this is there are people who are just starting out and they want to build themselves what, for lack of better words, a fan base. So they put out an entire course for free, and if you like, oh yeah, now you can try out my advanced one. And because you took this one, the advanced one is normally $50, but you can get it for $15, type of an idea. And again, I have no idea. I didn't go through this one. I don't know what, Sandeep Gautam, and he might speak better English than me, and he might have a very thick accent. There he is.
In this course, I'm going to cover client-side data binding to update the views as the new data coming from the server.
So, draw your
or
own
on the user.
conclusions, as far as how that would be to understand. I've taken courses with people who were a lot harder to understand than that. The last thing I'll mention too, and I said this to you before, if you go out to egghead.io, these are some really, really good people. And they've got courses out there. They've got an introduction to Android, someplace, Angular fundamentals. 9 videos, none of them are more than 10 minutes long. You're not going to become an expert, but it'll get you thinking about it, for lack of better words. Not only that, they have courses in Angular 2 I don't know where it is, but and they have JavaScript courses and some other ones. They've even got a CSS. All right. Just places that you can go look. All right. I'm not sure what we'll do next week for the Angular stuff, but we'll do something. I think what I'd rather do is, rather than show you this, rather create something simple as a class, literally from scratch, and have you key it in with me. All right. Hopefully you get some more out of that. We could even go back and do this one. All right. But you've got the code for it. And anything that I give you, I'm going to give you the code. I've got people that, John will tell you that I've got a couple second-year people who don't type fast, and they tend to think they have to write down everything I say. So they're trying to write and key in that stuff at the same time, and it doesn't work very well. All right. So that's, like I said, I thought it would only take about an hour, and that's what it took this week. So that's all that I have.